Well, a lot of us have been anxiously waiting for November when AMD has said we will get RDNA 3 launch on November 3rd. However, it's looking like the word launch there might not mean actually launch into the hands of anybody, and the actual launch might be going into December, although I will say this is leaks and rumors, this is not completely official. Also, according to the same leak, we're seeing that it could be difficult for this GPU to compete with Nvidia's RTX 40 GPUs. Now, let's go ahead and dig into some of these details and figure out whether Lisa Su is in trouble over here. Now, this is coming, well, I'm reading a WCCF Tech article about it, but the actual information is coming from Enthusiast Citizen or Enthusiastic Citizen. Now, as leaks go, tracking track records can get pretty complicated. But Enthusiastic Citizen, I mostly remember from actually getting hands-on reviews of especially Intel CPUs, like way before. Like we've seen 13900K review samples reviewed weeks, months ago. I mean, so it does seem to have connections in the industry, and I think is located in China, maybe near some factories. I don't know. So I'm just going to say that we have had good information from this source in the past. Now, what do they say? It says the new Radeon card released in November. So notice released in November. So maybe we're just getting that product launch announcement in November, because he's now saying will be launched in the second half of December. So released and launched. Now, I almost wonder if those words should be flipped, and I think this is probably being Google translated here, or there's a language barrier, so bear that in mind. The first flagship and second flagship, so apparently two flagships. Does that mean we're getting a 7950 XT and a 7900? Who knows? Anyway, however, the top performance is difficult to compete with the 40. I would assume we're talking about the 4090 there. And I hope the price will not be as confident as Ryzen. I would agree. I would hope for them going aggressive on the pricing here compared to what Nvidia is doing. But then they're getting this question, the performance can't compete. Does it mean traditional grading or light chasing? I think we're, again, hitting a language barrier here, and they're talking about, does this mean traditional rasterized performance or ray tracing? And the response here is both. So that is pretty interesting, okay? So, I mean, AMD themselves, again, have said, save the date, RDNA 3, November 3rd. And then we've also seen, let's see if they have it in this article, maybe they don't, but they have specifically said that they've targeted, I mean, it's here, we've seen it from official AMD slides, a greater than 50% performance per watt versus RDNA 2 uplift. So, I mean, if you think about where they already were versus Ampere, and then a 50% performance gain, if we got that, I mean, that would put them in a ballpark somewhere around, maybe they're not beating the 4090, but again, there are questions about exactly how enhanced will their ray tracing capabilities be. And also think about a greater performance per watt, since performance per watt, your efficiency, there's an efficiency curve, right? So depending on where you're taking that measurement at low power, at low wattages or high wattages, I mean, there's some question about, does that mean the top end chips pushed aggressively are actually going to be 50% stronger? So there's a lot of questions there. They're also on a 5 nanometer process node, and process nodes can be confusing, but I am pretty sure that Nvidia is on a slightly better TSMC process this time around, whereas last time around, AMD was on a superior TSMC process versus Nvidia's Samsung process. So I don't know, guys. I'm really, really hoping, like, honestly, it would be cool to see AMD able to take the performance lead just for the sake of shaking up the graphics market, right? Having the highest performance. I don't expect that myself. So I'm actually okay with them, not beating the 4090. That would be fine. Because if they got within, 10 or 15% of a 4090, but charged, $800. Now, I'm not promising you anything, but you see what I'm saying? I care about price to performance. The vast majority of people can't use a 4090's performance anyway because the latest CPUs can't even keep up unless you're in the most demanding 4K games. So I would like to see price to performance. Now, more AMD Navi rumors is we're seeing a rumor saying that it could support an unannounced DisplayPort 2.1 interface. Now that sounds a bit weird to me given that DisplayPort 2.0 is already so new, but we have a lot of information basically confirming that we will see DisplayPort 2.0 at least from AMD. And that's at least, again, some sort of an advantage over Nvidia, because a lot of people have been frustrated that Nvidia's 4090 only has DisplayPort 1.4. Now, this is from from Kyle Bennett on Twitter, saying verification from multiple sources that Radeon Navi 31 will support upcoming DisplayPort 2.1 specification. I'm tremendously surprised that GeForce 4090 only supports DP 1.4a. Props to Linus Tech for calling that out in their review. Anyway, and also I want to clarify here, because in one of my videos where I mentioned being annoyed by the DisplayPort 1.4a on the 4090, I think there was some confusion between people saying, oh, so the 4090 can't output more than 4K 120. That's not true. It can output past that, but then it has to use display stream compression and or like chroma subsampling. I haven't got a chance to play around with exactly the details, but the point is, it means that you can't get an uncompressed image past 4K 120. That's what it means. And so for future displays, and again, this is a high-end GPU. Somebody might buy a new 4K monitor that has DisplayPort 2.0 in the near future, want a 4090, but then have to have some sort of compressed image if they're going to be going past that, which would be frustrating. Now, speaking of the 4090 and high refresh rates, well, if you want to go beyond 4K 120, another option is 8K, because that's NVIDIA's response to this whole question. The official Q&A with NVIDIA says, why isn't DisplayPort 2.0 listed on the spec sheet? And they say the current DisplayPort 1.4 standard already supports 8K at 60. They ignore the fact that, okay, but it can't do 4K 240. But anyway, so they say support for DisplayPort 2.0 and consumer gaming displays are still a ways in the future, so they're just not worried about it because it's not a thing like right this second. Anyway, speaking of 8K 60, while most reviews understandably did not focus on 8K gaming, I'm seeing it reported here that I think this is from the Tech Chap on YouTube, but I'm seeing the WCCF Tech article reporting on it. Did test out some 8K gaming on the 4090 for the, tiny percentage of people who might be interested in such a thing. Now, the one thing, though, is that this is not true, native 8K gaming. He's definitely using DLSS 3 data, and I think we're using the ultra performance mode on the upscaling as well. But that being said, it does look like he's able to get Microsoft Flight Simulator. I can't speak, guys. Anyway, RTX 4090 65 FPS in the 1% lows with 81 FPS average. And the 3090 up against that was only getting 37 FPS in the 1% lows and 46 FPS average. So while the 3090 had been marketed as an 8K gaming GPU, and the 4090 wasn't, I think NVIDIA learned from their mistakes. It looks like, again, thanks to that frame generation technology, we might actually be seeing the first 8K capable display, except the issue is when you're running at lower frame rates, that's actually where the DLSS 3 frame generation is at its worst. Let's talk a little bit more about this let's do that next. So let's talk about DLSS 3 frame generation. Now, a couple of interesting things. One thing is there's apparently a Reddit thread going on that a Reddit user got an RTX 2070 to double its frames in Cyberpunk by using some weird config file that somehow unlocked frame generation. Now, I've got to say, This seems pretty sketchy. I would need to see more information here. Because this is literally just a Reddit post from some guy saying that he got, around 80 FPS instead of the 35 to 40 that he normally gets after adding in some kind of config file to reduce VRAM overhead in Cyberpunk. It's weird. It's interesting. Now, theoretically, I don't see a reason why DLSS 3 frame generation couldn't be ran on these lower, on the older GPUs. Officially from Nvidia, though, the optical flow acceleration on the previous generations isn't fast enough to make their current version of frame generation run smoothly, so it doesn't make sense. So they're claiming that it really is a hardware limit, at least at this point, in that it wouldn't run it well. And if you do read into the Reddit post there, he does say that it doesn't seem to run particularly smoothly. So that's interesting. Now, speaking of running smoothly, let's talk about what I mean here about running it at these lower FPS ranges. So I've been watching a lot of the reviews of DLSS 3 frame generation, and the Digital Foundry did their follow-up video. And what I've got to say about this is it seems like a win more feature. Have any of you guys, if you've been into competitive games, like sometimes you see a certain like move or build or feature classed as a win more. It really doesn't help you win, it helps you win more, meaning if you're already winning, it helps it be even easier to win by more. And what I mean by that is the issues with the frame generation image quality and latency are less noticeable the higher your base frame rate already is, because the quality, the AI images that are of lesser quality will be on your screen longer the lower your frame rate is. And also just like the more input information you have, the better, that kind of a thing. So frame generation is interesting in that normal DLSS, which is really just an entirely different thing. I actually don't like that this is being branded as DLSS 3, because DLSS up till now has been a completely different thing than frame generation. They're just not really the same thing. And DLSS was at its best the lower your frame rate was, and helping lower end GPUs handle a situation that they really couldn't natively. Whereas frame generation seems to be at its best boosting performance that's already good, which is kind of interesting. I don't know what to say. But I've already talked a lot about that. Let's talk about some more stuff. So I talked about these benchmark charts a lot yesterday, so I don't need to go into that a whole bunch today. But I will say that while I was comparing the 3080 as a baseline and looking how things scaled up from there, another way of looking at that information that we're seeing here from video cards is looking at the 4080 12GB itself as a baseline. And they've put all three games here in relation to it. And then we can now look at that and then look at how the 4080 16GB, the 4090, 3090 Ti, 3080, and 3070 fall in comparison to that. So anyway, it's interesting. The 4080 12GB, I think in and of itself, it's not that it has bad performance. It looks very close here to a 3090 Ti, and then it would have that frame generation feature, which is a nice to have, absolutely, for sure. Although here it does have half the VRAM and costs a lot, right? My main issue here is the price, right? And it's frustrating that these are called the same thing, but I'm less even concerned about what it's called and more just concerned about the pricing structure of it. Okay, that's what's so frustrating. Anyway, but there you go. Interesting chart here if you want to see how things stack up percentage-wise to the 4080 12GB in the new product stack. Now, speaking of DLSS 3, I did already mention this in that video as well, but I will say that we do have some games confirmed to be launching very soon with support, and then more coming later into the month. Now, again, looking at this game list, I mean, it depends on the kinds of games that you play, but I don't know, guys, I'd like to see some other games on that list. Anyway, in the new NVIDIA graphics driver, we're also seeing added support for the RTX 3070 Ti made on a GA102 chip, which is not I think currently it's on GA 103. It's like currently the 3070 Ti is an overclocked 3070, not a cut down 3080. So this is super interesting. And also RTX 30 series support. So basically, it looks like if you dig into the output from nvdispig.inf file with the new driver, we're seeing this added in here under GA102. We're seeing a new 3070 Ti being added in there. Notice that the previous GA102s were the 3080s and 3090s. The GA103s, we don't see anything new there, but under GA104, there's already was a 3060 Ti, but now we're seeing another listing for a 3060 Ti. And this is seeming to be some confirmation for the rumors that we'll see a 3060 Ti updated possibly with GDDR6X memory instead of GDDR6. And we're also seeing another GA106 listed here. Because again, there's already a 3060 here. There's actually a couple of 3060s here, but we're seeing another 3060 here. So that's interesting. So it does look like there's going to be some sort of a refresh to Intel's 30 series mid-range. Again, we don't have confirmation of exactly what that's going to be. But I think it's really interesting, and I wonder if that means that is Nvidia planning on like seriously delaying any new 4000 series mid-range, and we're just going to refresh the 30 series mid-range? I don't know, guys. That's weird. We're also seeing Alphacool releasing a 360mm AIO kit for the Nvidia GeForce RTX 4090 reference GPUs. This is just kind of a press release from them being published on videocards.com. But if you're interested in getting some water cooling going on one of those, if you have one of the reference models, there you go. Now we're seeing the Intel Core i9-1300KF already in enthusiast hands a week ahead of launch. So we're seeing a member of the overclock.net forums claiming that he's already got one. And posting some screenshots here of some Cinebench R23 results, looking like it's, performing well, giving us some 85 degrees Celsius temperature, 292 watt CPU package power, peak 5.5 gigahertz all core frequencies. And it'll be interesting to see if he gives us some more info before the official review embargo lifts. If he has one in his hands and isn't review embargoed, we'll see what we get. Speaking of Intel, though, we are seeing Intel being reported at planning to cut thousands of jobs in the face of the PC market slump, although it's looking like this will hit sales and marketing especially hard. Hopefully, hopefully we're still seeing the GPU division, right? Anyway. Now, this is unfortunate. A while back, we'd seen Scorn reported as being going to support DirectStorage on PC, but it's looking like that is no longer the case. The Scorn developer here is tweeting, "There was a misunderstanding on my behalf, and I made an error on my response here. To confirm, DirectStorage is only available via Xbox. I apologize for the confusion." So at this point, we are now still looking at Square Enix's Forspoken as probably being the first game, and that a while back got delayed into January of 2023. Speaking of new games, Gotham Knights is getting an official minimum system requirements, and it looks, well, for a minimum requirement, quite a bit. Okay, guys. A lot of times as we get into these more next-gen games, the minimum requirements go up. Now, the memory is only listed at 8 gigabytes. The minimum processor is listed as an i5-9600K, which is like a 2019 chip, I think. That's fairly new. That was actually my gaming PC, 2 years ago before I started. Actually, 1 year ago. It was only 1 year ago I upgraded from an i5-9600K. Anyway, the graphics they're listing as a 1660 Ti or AMD Radeon RX 590. And again, this is the minimum requirements. But they're saying that the minimum requirements are for 1080p 60 FPS low. So if you'd be willing to go down to 30 FPS, you could actually cut these GPUs in half, at least performance-wise, maybe not VRAM-wise or whatever other, DirectX features and all that you might need. Anyway, we're not seeing any recommended requirements yet at this point, but 1080p 60 FPS low will apparently require 1660 Ti or RX 590 and a pretty decent CPU if this is anything correct to go off of. Now, I've got to get to work and also figure out why I just got an email saying that my AdSense account got canceled. Guys, I've got to pay for a 4090. Please don't give me AdSense revenue problems. Anyway, let me figure out what that's all about. I hope all of you have an excellent day.